This story isn't for drama or views. It's here so you can learn from others' mistakes and never repeat them.
The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, it was how ordinary it all looked. The room smelled faintly of lavender from her stupid diffuser. Her robe was still hanging from the doorknob like she hadn't just desecrated the life we built. His belt lay coiled on the floor like a snake mid-shed. And the bed sheets, our wedding gift from my mother, were bunched at her ankles like some sick punchline to a joke I never signed up to hear. I didn't make a sound. No explosion, no slamming doors, just stood there for a second, absorbing it like a man watching his own house burn from the sidewalk, too late to save anything. He froze like a kid caught shoplifting. She squeaked something that wasn't even a sentence. I stepped forward, extended a hand. "She's yours," I said, voice steady as a mortician. "I'll pack her things." He didn't move. She did, bolted upright like she suddenly remembered how shame works. "Wait, what are you—" "Greg, please." But I was already walking to the closet, the one I installed by hand, with shelves I cut and painted myself because she wanted a custom space for her scarves. Yeah, the scarves I now folded and tossed into a suitcase like garbage headed for Goodwill. To anyone listening, I probably sounded deranged, calm, efficient, like a man packing for vacation, not divorce, but that was the only way I knew how to keep from losing it. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. I remember picking up a framed picture from our trip to Oregon. Us on the coast, her hair blown wild by the wind, both of us laughing. I turned it face down and left it on the nightstand. I wasn't sentimental. I just didn't want that version of her watching me pack the remnants of her betrayal. Now, if you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed yet, do it, seriously. It helps us keep telling these stories. And trust me, it only gets crazier from here. She followed me halfway across the room, tugging a sheet around herself like modesty suddenly mattered. "This isn't what it looks like," she blurted, voice cracking like a teenager busted sneaking in past curfew. I didn't stop folding. "Oh, I'm sorry. Were you giving him CPR? Because from where I stood, it looked pretty textbook." He finally found his voice. "Look, man, don't," I snapped, raising a finger. "Don't look man me. You're in my house, in my bed, on my sheets, with my wife." Then I paused. "Well, former wife. Let's keep the tenses accurate." She tried again. "Please, we weren't trying to hurt you." "Is that why you waited till I was out of town?" I said. Real considerate. Nothing says love like timing your betrayal between flights. I zipped the suitcase, clicked the handle up, and rolled it to the bedroom door. She stepped in front of it, blocking me. "Greg, you're not even going to talk to me? Yell, cry, something?" I stared at her. "You want tears? Go see your HR department. I'm sure they've got an employee assistance program." She flinched like I slapped her. He stayed silent, still half covered in the duvet like a roach caught mid-scuttle. For a second, I thought about decking him. Just one clean punch. But that's what they expected. Rage, fire, drama. Nah, instead, I turned to her and said, "Don't worry about laundry. I already threw out your favorite mug. You know, the one that says Boss Babe? Seemed appropriate." I walked out, not dramatically, not with flair, just walked because the second I saw them, something inside me turned off, like a switch. You think you're prepared for betrayal, that if it ever happens, you'll see it coming, but you don't. It creeps in like mold behind drywall. By the time you notice the smell, the foundation's already rotten. I didn't cry. Not that day. I drove straight to a hotel, checked in under my old college nickname, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the cheap painting on the wall. Some abstract forest, no people in it, just trees, peaceful, alone, honest. The exact opposite of what I just left behind. And that's when the numbness began to melt into something colder, heavier, not grief, not even hate, something far more useful. The place I moved into had peeling linoleum and a view of a brick wall, but the quiet was worth its weight in gold. I didn't need amenities. I needed silence, no fake apologies, no tight-lipped father-in-law telling me to be a man and move past it, no echo of her voice rehearsing the kind of lies that only work on someone who still wants to believe, just the whir of an old fridge and the occasional bark of the neighbor's dog through the wall. She didn't call, not once. No texts either, not even a guilt-ridden "can we talk," which told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. She was stalling, hoping maybe I'd cool off, come crawling back with some humiliating line like, "Let's go to counseling." She probably even practiced her tearful act in the mirror, but the thing about silence, it doesn't heal, it sharpens. You start remembering things in sequence with clarity, like the perfume, that sudden switch from the lavender I'd always bought her to something sharper, amber and musk, too strong for casual dinners, perfect for late meetings, or the gift card she kept forgetting to mention. "It was just a holiday thing from the team," she once said, about a $500 luxury spa receipt I saw in her purse. The team, sure, but the password change? That one hit harder. We'd always shared everything, bank logins, grocery apps, even the Netflix account. Then, out of the blue, she updated her iCloud passcode. "Work stuff," she claimed. "Legal compliance." I hadn't questioned it. I thought I was being respectful. That was before I remembered her old tablet, the one she stopped using after her birthday last year, still synced, still alive, and still tied to her cloud like a vein to a beating heart. I charged it with an old frayed cable, expecting nothing. But as soon as the lock screen flickered on, messages started syncing, dozens of them, images, audio files, voice notes, emails with vague subject lines like "late tonight again" and "quick drop-off." Most of them were mundane, but one stood out. A voice recording, half muffled like it was sent from the inside of a car. Him, Carl, her boss. "You're worth the risk. He'll never know." Not "he'll never find out." Not "he'd be crushed." Just a casual brush off like I was some dull-witted background character in their little office romance. I played that message 10 times, memorized the cadence in his voice, the smugness baked into that 7-word sentence. It was more than an affair. It was confidence. A shared delusion that I didn't matter, that recording should have broken me. Instead, it leveled me out like a shot of whiskey on a winter night. Burns going down, but it clears your head. I stopped pacing, stopped grieving, and started writing things down. A timeline, receipts, mileage gaps on the car we both shared. Her credit card statements with 2 lattes bought at 10 p.m. miles from her supposed team-building events. Carl's name popped up like a bad penny. Dinner reservations, hotel key cards, a boutique floral shop she never once mentioned charging his Amex. Piece by piece, the illusion folded in on itself. I didn't just want out anymore. I wanted it to matter that I found out. There's a kind of dignity in planning. When you've been gutted, dignity is all you've got left. And while she paraded around in conference rooms with her new perfume and inflated title, I sat under a flickering kitchen light eating cold Chinese takeout and charting the anatomy of betrayal. My silence wasn't forgiveness. It was study, and she gave me more material than she realized. By the 3rd day, I knew I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That would make it too easy. No, if I was going to be discarded like a spare pair of shoes, I was going to make sure she stepped right into the consequences. The tablet buzzed again. Another sync. A calendar invite. Q1 strategy retreat. Weekend Malibu. 2 names. Carl, her. No other attendees listed. Interesting, because she'd told me she'd be home that weekend, said she'd help me sort out the basement boxes. I smiled, not bitterly, strategically. She wasn't careful. And now I didn't have to be kind. Chris picked up on the second ring. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 5 years, not since his daughter's quinceañera, where he got too drunk and kept calling me Captain America in front of the catering staff. But the thing about dragging a man out of a flaming SUV on the I-5 during a July pileup is it buys you a certain kind of loyalty, the permanent kind, the no questions asked kind. "Greg," he said, voice cautious but friendly, "you calling means something's gone real sideways. I need a sit down. Today." He didn't hesitate. "My office in an hour. Bring coffee. Black." His office was tucked behind a strip mall between a Pilates studio and a vape shop. Classic Chris. No flash, all leverage. I walked in with 2 black coffees and a manila folder that looked emptier than it was. He glanced at me, took one look at my face, and didn't bother with pleasantries. "What are we handling?" "Divorce," I said, dropping into the leather chair across from him. "Preemptive. No papers filed yet, no screaming, no lawyers, except you." He leaned back. "Yours, hers, or mutual?" "Just mine. She doesn't know I'm here. I'd like to keep it that way." Chris sipped, but nodded slowly. "All right. Tell me what's joint and what's not." "The house is joint. Everything else, retirement, brokerage, crypto, even the business, is in my name only. Pre-marriage, documented, but if she gets aggressive, she'll try to claw it anyway. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He tapped his pen on a legal pad. You want this fast or surgical? I looked him straight in the eye. Surgical and quiet. I want her to think I'm still in shock, that I'm licking my wounds in some motel, playing sad songs and crying over my breakfast burrito. Chris smiled, dark and impressed. You always were too damn calm in a crisis. It's not a crisis, it's a cleanup. He paused, then asked the question I'd been waiting for. Is there a third party involved? I didn't blink. There's a Carl. Chris winced. Always a Carl. I laid out the structure. I wanted her name quietly removed from the upcoming refinance we had scheduled in 3 weeks. I wanted her to sign a quitclaim deed, voluntarily if possible. If not, we'd use other leverage, the kind Carl wouldn't want exposed to the board. Chris jotted notes, asked for logins, file numbers, any emails that showed intent to vacate, anything she'd sent that I could reframe as mutual separation. I handed over a flash drive with select excerpts from the tablet. Not enough to be explosive, but enough to suggest a pattern. Play it cool for now, Chris said, scanning the files. We'll start paperwork that doesn't raise red flags. She won't see the storm coming until her name's off everything that matters. Exactly. And if she does? I smirked. Then we go from surgical to autopsy. We discussed timelines, trust modifications, locking down beneficiaries, even the dog's registration. Yes, the damn golden retriever was in both our names. He made a joke about splitting custody with Carl, but I didn't laugh. I handed him a napkin I pulled from her purse the night I left. On it was a scrawled list. Weekend, Carl nail apt. Ask Harold about shift for Q2. Harold, her father. That one name turned this from betrayal to chess. Chris saw it too. He held up the napkin. This Harold, he in on it? Not yet, but he will be. Good, Chris said. We'll keep that card tucked. Now, any sentimental assets? One, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a silver compass I gave her on our 5th anniversary. She told me she kept it in her office drawer. Funny, it was still in the nightstand when I packed. Chris studied it, confused. You want this appraised? No, I said. I want it back in her hands when the floor drops out, just so she remembers who knew the direction all along. Chris exhaled, leaned back. You're not here to win the divorce, Greg. You're here to rewrite the ending. I stood up, fixing my jacket. No, I'm here to make sure she doesn't get to write it at all. As I walked out, he called after me. Give me 5 days. Keep your head down. I didn't turn around, just lifted my coffee in a lazy salute. Let her think I was broken. Let her think Carl was an upgrade. Let her think silence meant surrender. Because the truth was, I was already 10 moves ahead. Carl always gave off that used car lot charisma. Overconfident, underqualified, and permanently 3 drinks away from calling someone champ. I never liked him, but I never suspected him. Not really. He was just another name in her office gossip, the kind of guy who got the bonus nobody clapped for at the holiday party. Harmless, annoying, forgettable. Until I started looking. It began with the HR reports. Chris had a contact. Divorce cases tend to cross paths with corporate skeletons, and I used that thread to start unraveling Carl's golden boy routine. According to the internal logs, he was nearly canned last year for conduct unbecoming. Vague, but serious. Not a slap on the wrist, the kind of thing that usually ends in cardboard boxes and a clean-out escort. But he didn't get fired. He got promoted. That's when I knew. Someone stepped in. I pulled property records, board filings, executive communications, anything tied to the company and Carl's miraculous resurrection. And there it was, a single name buried in a meeting transcript from the board's private records, flagged in red by Chris's contact. Harold, my father-in-law. Retired technically, but still very much in orbit, a man with old money, old favors, and a Rolodex full of people who owed him quiet nods. The same Harold who once told me, you marry my daughter, you marry the legacy, who used to treat me like some working-class curiosity, tolerated because I kept his daughter out of therapy and knew which fork to use at dinner. I read that line 3 times. Harold Thomas recommends review before termination. A single sentence, a lifeline. Carl was circling the drain, and Harold reached in and pulled him out. I sat there in the rental kitchen, the screen's glow turning the walls a shade of sickly blue, and tried to make it make sense. This man, my wife's father, had bailed out the guy she was cheating with. Either he knew or he didn't want to know. And in both scenarios, the message was the same. I didn't matter. I remembered the last Christmas at their house. Carl was there, just a work friend stopping by. Harold poured him scotch, made jokes about real men staying late at the office, and kept refilling Carl's glass like they were frat brothers. I'd chalked it up to Harold's usual posturing. He always had a soft spot for smooth-talking failures. But now I saw it clearly. That wasn't camaraderie, that was cover. The betrayal burned differently when it came from Harold. My wife, she made her choices, but Harold, he chose Carl over me, backed him, cleared his path, enabled the affair before it ever started. I started replaying all the times Harold had suggested things to me over the years. Get a better car, take his daughter on a real vacation, stop working weekends. She deserves attention. I thought it was fatherly meddling. It was grooming. He wanted her lined up with someone more malleable, more dependent, someone who would owe him everything. Carl. The same Carl who now had the corner office and my wife in his bed. I scrolled through my photo backups and found a picture from a charity gala. Carl in the middle. Harold to his right, hand on his shoulder, my wife on Carl's left, no space between them. I hadn't noticed it then. I saw it now. This wasn't just a random affair. This was orchestrated, a long game, and I'd been the placeholder husband while the real plan played out over boardroom cigars and golf course whispers. I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking, my pulse wasn't racing, but something had shifted, something fundamental. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was a network. And if Harold wanted to pick favorites, he'd feel what it meant to choose wrong. He once told me over a glass of bourbon, in this family, loyalty's everything. I used to believe that now. Now I was ready to redefine what loyalty costs. I picked the place on purpose. Dark wood walls, overpriced steaks, and enough noise to drown out anything I didn't want overheard. It was one of Harold's favorites. He used to bring clients here before he retired, which really meant he got tired of pretending to care about paperwork. But he still liked the performance of power, the theater of being recognized. Mr. Thomas, your usual booth? Of course. I booked it under my name. When he walked in, he looked exactly how I expected. Crisp blazer, too much cologne, smile already loaded and cocked. He extended his hand like none of this had happened. She told me you'd come around, he said, as he sat down across from me. Did she also tell you I walked in on them? I replied, pouring him a whiskey from the bottle already waiting on the table. His favorite, neat, 1 cube. His smirk faltered, but he recovered. These things happen. Marriages hit turbulence. People get confused. I smiled thinly. You mean when your daughter ends up naked on top of a man you personally saved from being fired? He blinked. I slid the folder across the table without a word. Cream-colored, plain, inside printed emails from Carl to her personal account. Bank transfers between an LLC Carl set up and a boutique condo leasing firm. And at the very top, a signed lease agreement in her name for a 1-bedroom apartment dated 2 weeks before I found them in my bed. Harold opened it slowly. His hands, usually so steady, hesitated just slightly. He scanned the first page, then the second. Then he sat back and stared at the whiskey glass like he'd just realized it was poisoned. I didn't know, he said finally. No, I agreed. But you helped it happen. His jaw tensed. He closed the folder. What do you want, Greg? I want to know why you vouched for Carl, I said. Why that man was worth your protection. Harold looked uncomfortable for the first time in his life. He glanced around, then leaned in slightly. He was vulnerable, sloppy, easy to mold. And yes, I thought he had potential. He was grateful. Unlike you. I laughed just once. Grateful? You mean pliable. The kind of man who'd owe you forever. You saw me as competition. I married your daughter without needing a loan, built my own company, paid off your grandchild's medical bills before you even knew they existed. He said nothing. I continued. Carl got promoted because of you. You interfered, and you didn't care what strings he'd pull once he got leverage. You didn't protect your daughter. You positioned her. like she was a pawn. And Carl, he was just the rook. I was thinking about her future. Harold muttered. No, I said. You were thinking about control. The waiter came by and asked for orders. Harold waved him off. I poured myself a drink now, matching him. This isn't about marriage anymore. This is about legacy, and I know you care about that more than anything. He narrowed his eyes. You're bluffing. Am I? I leaned forward. Because I've been quiet. I haven't spoken to HR. I haven't leaked the emails. I haven't mentioned the quarterly audit that shows Carl funneling funds through your old golf club's consulting account. That one hit. His fingers twitched on the glass. You think your name protects you, Harold, but the truth is, you've tied yourself to a man who's about to implode, and when he does, I won't have to say a word. Your silence will do all the talking. He set the glass down, now visibly shaken. I'm not here to beg, I said. I'm not even here to threaten. I'm here to give you a chance, to step back before this gets ugly. What do you want from me? I slid another document across the table, this one thinner, a board proposal, technically anonymous, but we both knew where it came from. I want Carl out, quietly, before the next shareholder meeting, and I want her to sign the quitclaim deed by Friday. No lawyer, no fight, just walk away. He stared at the paper, and if I say no, I drank my whiskey, smiled coldly. Then I stopped being quiet. Harold didn't finish his drink. He left the restaurant without looking back. The folder tucked under one arm like a casket he didn't want to admit belonged to him. I stayed behind, ordered the steak he used to get, rare, and waited because I knew what was coming. He'd call Carl tonight, and by tomorrow the chessboard would shift. Harold didn't call, didn't text, didn't send one of his cryptic follow-up emails that always ended with, "Let's keep this between us." He just disappeared into silence, the kind of silence that feels less like retreat and more like waiting for a forest fire to burn itself out. But I wasn't a fire. I was a fault line, and Harold was still standing on it, so I stopped waiting. The next Monday I requested a private session with the board, 5 senior members, including 2 I knew through my consulting firm. I didn't walk in with a flamethrower. I brought a flashlight, subtle, controlled, just enough to make them look under the right rocks. Appreciate you making time, I started. I'm not here in any formal capacity, just a concerned party who's watched this company grow over the last decade. They nodded. One of them, Angela, gave me that neutral but wary corporate smile. You have the board's ear. I took a breath and slid over a presentation binder. No dramatic title, no accusations, just a clean tab. Departmental instability, Q4 trends. I walked them through it. Low attrition in most departments, except one, Carl's, missed deadlines, employee complaints, internal surveys with anonymous responses like toxic leadership and favoritism from upstairs. I mentioned the HR red flags, quietly shelved complaints from last year. No names, not yet, just patterns. Then I showed them the financial drift, a recurring line item, external consulting, vague vendor names, payments that curiously overlapped with Carl's weekend retreats and golf outings. Again, nothing directly illegal, just messy enough to raise an eyebrow. I leaned back and said, "You're all investors in the long-term reputation of this firm. If one department quietly poisons morale, eventually the rot spreads." Angela asked, "Are you alleging mismanagement?" "I'm pointing out a storm before it hits the shore," I replied. Another board member, Rick, sharp as broken glass, looked at the timeline I'd outlined and narrowed his eyes. "These reports suggest there may be HR violations." I nodded slowly. "And possibly liability if any of those complaints resurface publicly." Silence. I could feel the calculus happening in real time. Carl was never popular. He was tolerated, promoted through favors, not merit, the kind of guy who carried just enough dirt on the right people to stay useful. But now he was becoming a cost center, the kind of liability you don't renew when the fiscal year turns. I didn't give them a smoking gun. I gave them a drawer full of matches and a reason not to wait for the fire. By Wednesday, the first crack appeared. Carl was absent from a scheduled all-hands meeting. His assistant told people he was traveling. By Thursday, the whisper started, something about an internal matter, something about indefinite leave. On Friday, the company issued a vague email. Effective immediately, Carl Edwards will be stepping away from his role to focus on personal matters. No mention of Harold, no warning to my wife. Just like that, Carl evaporated, scrubbed from the company's website by noon. I didn't celebrate, not outwardly. Instead, I sat in the back corner of the same coffee shop where my wife once introduced me to her team, Carl included, and I watched an intern update the executive roster on LinkedIn in real time. Carl's profile read, former. It was beautiful, not explosive, not dramatic, just clean, like a surgical incision with no stitches needed. And the pressure, it wasn't done building, because Carl was never the only problem. He was just the door. Now it was time to show my wife what had been waiting behind it. I dialed her number like I was punching in a code to defuse a bomb, deliberate, detached, knowing full well it might still blow. She answered on the third ring. I could hear wind through the phone, probably outside somewhere, pretending the world hadn't shifted under her feet. Greg? Her voice was soft, cautious, like she thought I might still be sobbing into couch cushions somewhere with a half-eaten pizza and old wedding photos. We need to talk, I said. My place, tomorrow morning. A pause, then, Are you okay? I almost laughed, not bitterly, more like a surgeon about to make the first incision. I'm not here to scream, I said. I'm here to return what doesn't belong to me. She hesitated. I let the silence hang just long enough to remind her I was calling from a place she no longer had access to. Then she said, okay. I didn't confirm the time, just hung up, because the real schedule was already set. She had no idea who else would be sitting at that table. That night, I moved everything out of the living room except 2 chairs and a coffee table, stripped it bare, no distractions, just the echo of consequences. Her suitcase, packed neatly, labeled, not with her name but with a simple sticky note that read, property claimed, sat by the door, and across from it 3 copies of a bound document, each one stamped and tabbed, one for her, one for Carl, one for Harold. Yes, they'd all be there. Carl already knew something was wrong. He'd gone ghost since the personal leave announcement. I texted him from a burner number, just one sentence. If you want to control the fallout, show up, 9 a.m. tomorrow. He replied with a single question mark. I sent an attachment, one of the more explicit screenshots from the cloud sync. His face, half visible, hers, very visible, the kind of image that HR wouldn't just fire you over, they'd firewall you out of the building before the end of your sentence. He confirmed within 5 minutes. Harold? That was easier. I sent his assistant a single manila envelope. Inside was a redacted summary of the board meeting, not the full transcript, just the keywords. HR, audit, board recommendation, no threat, no ultimatum. He called me that evening. No pleasantries. What time? He asked. 9. He didn't argue, just hung up. Perfect. The trap wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about exposure, letting them squirm in the truth, making them sit together in a room they couldn't control. I wanted them to see each other, not as allies in a quiet betrayal, but as liabilities with matching stains on their hands. My wife had relied on silence. Carl had relied on arrogance. Harold had relied on reputation. And now, all 3 were about to see what happens when silence ends. Arrogance fails, and reputation has a receipt stapled to it. I went to bed early, slept 8 hours for the first time in weeks. No racing thoughts, no dreams, just the steady rhythm of strategy settling into place. Tomorrow morning, the living room would be cold, empty, sterile, exactly the environment a virus needs to die in. And I would be the scalpel. 9 a.m. sharp, my watch chimed as the doorbell rang. I didn't flinch. I already knew the order they'd arrive in. Carl, the coward, would be early. He needed control. Harold would show up next, 5 minutes late to assert dominance he no longer had. And she, my wife, would be last, hoping to be fashionably innocent. Carl stepped in like a man visiting his own crime scene. Cheap cologne, wrinkled collar, tension sweating through his hairline. He didn't say a word, just looked around at the bare room, the sterile air, the 2 chairs facing each other across the coffee table. He saw the 3rd chair in the corner and frowned. No lawyers, he muttered. No need, I replied. We're not in court, we're in reality. He opened his mouth, but the doorbell cut him off. Harold entered wearing his favorite trench coat and that permanent country club scowl. He took one look at Carl, and the corners of his mouth twitched, not a smile, something tighter, something like recognition giving way to regret. "Gentlemen," Harold said, voice flat. "Chair's yours," I said, pointing without standing. Then the third ring. She walked in like she thought she could still negotiate the tone of the room, tan coat over a blouse too crisp for a casual visit. Her eyes scanned the scene and froze on Carl, then Harold, then me. "What is this?" she asked. I stood, walked over to the table, picked up the binder, and handed it to her. I didn't say a word until she opened it. "It's everything you left behind," I said. She looked down, confused at first. Then her breath caught. Her eyes jumped from page to page. Photos, messages, a time-stamped timeline, voicemail transcripts, the lease for her secret apartment, credit card charges from trips she'd never told me about. But I'd highlighted just one sentence in yellow, right in the middle of the second page. He doesn't suspect anything. His trust is a shield. Carl closed his eyes like a man waiting for a car crash. Harold looked anywhere but at his daughter. She tried to speak, but the words got caught. You went through my cloud storage," I said. "Linked through your old tablet. You know, the one you never unpaired. Turns out betrayal leaves backups." She turned to Carl. "You told me you deleted everything." Carl didn't respond. I stepped forward. "You didn't just betray me, you used me as cover, as your alibi, as the dumb, dependable husband who wouldn't look twice while you held staff meetings with your legs wrapped around a promotion." Her face strained. I turned to Harold. "And you, family protects family, right? That's what you said. But when Carl nearly got booted for misconduct, who saved him? Who vouched for the man that wrecked his daughter's marriage?" Harold finally met my eyes. Cold, gray, distant. "I thought I was helping." "No," I said. "You were buying control. You propped up a man too weak to fight back because you thought he'd owe you. Instead, he took your daughter and dragged your name through the same filth you used to warn me about." He said nothing. She sat down hard, like her knees had finally caught up to the weight of it. She flipped to the last page and saw the email I'd drafted but never sent, a resignation letter from Carl, time-stamped, formatted to company standards, unsigned. She looked back up. "You were going to expose all this?" "No," I said. "I didn't have to. I just left the breadcrumbs where the right people could find them." Carl looked like he was trying to shrink into the wall. I turned to him. "You're done. The board voted. The HR audit's already halfway through. Your little consulting slush fund, frozen. They're reviewing your expense reports with a microscope, and Harold won't be there to sweep anything under the rug this time." Carl's jaw tightened. "You vindictive bastard." I shrugged. "You should have worried about vindictive before you texted her on company time with an office iPhone." Then I faced her. "You called it a shield, my trust. You thought it made me weak. It didn't. It just gave you enough rope to hang yourself with." She looked at her father. "Dad, say something." But Harold just stared at the table. The man who ran boardrooms, manipulated elections and charities and alumni councils, sat there like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. "I didn't know it went that far," he muttered. I stepped back, let the silence hang. 3 people, 3 levels of betrayal, and not one of them had a single defense left. She finally snapped. All the composure she'd worn like a mask, the neat hair, the polite posture, the rehearsed breathing, cracked right down the center. "You never fought for me," she shouted, the binder falling from her lap to the floor with a smack that echoed like a gavel. I didn't move. "I did," I said quietly, "for 11 years, while you rehearsed excuses." Her hands were clenched now, nails digging into her palms, like maybe the pain would wake her up from this. But there was no dream to crawl back into. Just the mess she made, laid out in full color, printed, time-stamped, and bound like a thesis on self-destruction. "You stopped seeing me," she whispered. "You stopped showing up." "No," I said. "I just stopped performing. There's a difference." She looked at Carl for backup, but he was no longer looking at anyone, just the floor, probably calculating how many resumes he'd need to send out before someone would take him seriously again, and how many NDAs he'd need to sign to keep Harold's name out of the wreckage. Harold cleared his throat, sat forward, and finally tried to assert what little presence he had left. I understand this is painful. I raised a hand, palm outward, not angry, just done. Don't. He blinked. You didn't lose a son-in-law, I said. You traded him. You covered for a man who'll be out of a job by Monday. And what did you get for it? A scandal, an HR investigation, and the pleasure of watching your daughter fall apart in real time. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Because what could he say? That it was for her own good? That Carl was a safe bet? I turned to Carl. You'll be gone by noon. I made sure of it. They're calling it a sabbatical. You'll call it a blessing. Carl's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look small. His hands were folded tightly, knuckles white. He wasn't used to being without an audience. I let the moment linger because that's when it cuts deepest, when the person who always thought he had the upper hand realizes the floor's been removed. Then I looked back at her. You know what the worst part is? I asked. She didn't answer. Just stared at the binder on the floor like it might crawl back into her hands and edit itself. I'd have forgiven you if you'd come clean, if you'd admitted it before I walked in. But you didn't. You tried to keep both worlds going. The man you sleep with and the man you expect to carry your bags. Tears finally broke through. I made a mistake, she said, voice breaking. I nodded. No, you made a plan. I just saw it through. She looked older in that moment, smaller, not the woman I married, not even the woman who betrayed me. Just someone exposed, sitting in a chair that no longer belonged to her. She reached for the suitcase by the door. I stopped her. That's not yours. What's inside is. I packed what's yours in the garage, this house. I looked at Harold. It was always mine. She just forgot. I bent down, picked up the binder, and slipped a final envelope inside, her name printed cleanly on the front. She looked at it but didn't touch it. It's all in there, divorce papers, the deed reassignment, and a letter. She blinked through the tears. A letter? I met her eyes, cold, even, done. A reminder. Then I opened the door. No one moved for a beat, but eventually Carl stood, then Harold, and she followed. Silent now, eyes hollow, like someone had pulled the bones from her spine. As they crossed the threshold, I felt nothing heroic, no victory music, just quiet, heavy, necessary. She paused on the step, looked back. Greg. I didn't answer. I closed the door on all of it. She lingered in the doorway like she thought hesitation might buy her redemption, like dragging her feet would somehow turn this into a moment of pause, not consequence. Her eyes flicked back to the living room, still searching for traces of the life she used to own, but there were none. I'd stripped this place of sentiment the way she'd stripped us of trust, methodically and without apology. I made a mistake, she whispered again. Like maybe this time I'd flinch. I didn't. No, I said evenly. You made a plan. I just saw it through. She looked at me like I was supposed to break, cry, get angry, anything that would give her proof I still cared enough to be wounded. Instead, I pointed to the garage. Your suitcase is in there, clothes, laptop, the compass you gave back without noticing. The rest stays. This house was always mine. You were just on the lease of a life you didn't intend to honor. She inhaled sharply, but said nothing. It was the first honest breath she'd taken all morning. Then I handed her the envelope. Cream cardstock. Heavy. The kind lawyers and morticians use. No frills, all finality. Inside, signed divorce papers, notarized deed reassignment, and a letter. I'd thought about making it dramatic. Pouring out everything. The hurt. The humiliation. But that would have made her too important. So I wrote just one line. You lost a husband. He gained a warning. She didn't open it right away. Just stared at it like it might catch fire in her hands. You already mailed this to Carl, didn't you? She asked, eyes not leaving the envelope. I nodded. Certified. He should receive it by Tuesday. It's a different letter, but the message is the same. Her face collapsed, not in sadness. Shame. The kind of shame that doesn't scream. It whispers. Hides behind a perfect blouse and manicured nails, and a voice that says, I didn't mean for it to go this far when you damn well know they did. You were the better man, she finally said. No, I said. I was just the one who stayed silent long enough to finish what you started. She stepped backward into the cold air. Her heels clicked on the concrete like punctuation. Her car door opened, then closed. Engine started. No goodbye. I stood in the doorway until the taillights disappeared. Then I turned back inside. House empty, light bleeding in through the windows like the start of a new page. I walked over to the coffee table, picked up the binder she left behind, the one with every secret she thought I'd never learn. I didn't shred it, didn't burn it. I placed it in the back of the closet, behind old tax records and a broken lamp we'd fought over replacing for years. Not because I needed to keep it, but because some reminders are more useful when they're out of sight. I poured myself a drink, bourbon, neat, and sat in the chair she'd just left. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like an absence. It felt like ownership.